Good morning. It is always an honor to be with my beloved community at CSL Santa Cruz, and I invite you, as always, to begin with me wherever you are and whenever you hear this by beginning with 3 breaths together. So if you will, exhale and take a deep breath in. And let go. And taking another deep breath in. And letting go. And together we take one more deep breath in and let go. And so it is 4th of July weekend. We are around the country celebrating Independence Day. And here we are in the midst of an ever-changing world. And my conversation that I want to bring today is I'm calling a new definition of freedom. Because I believe that in a huge way that is the conversation that's up in our country right now is what is freedom, what is justice, and who is all? You know, I grew up with the Pledge of Allegiance and ending in these words with liberty and justice for all. And yet we in these United States, in our world, have been living in different histories. We've been living in different stories. We've been living in different experiences. And it's only now that as a collective consciousness, I think that we're actually beginning to look at those different histories and those different storylines. And that on this Independence Day weekend, I want us to begin to explore what is freedom. You know, Ernest Holmes says that freedom and emancipation from all discord is sure to be attained by all. And I often wonder what he means by that. Does he mean that freedom and emancipation from all discord is sure to be attained by everyone in this lifetime? Does he mean that we are all sure to experience this when we are freed from this lifetime? Does he perhaps mean that this is the nature of the universe and this is the march of evolution, and that eventually this experience will become true for all people? So as we explore freedom this morning, I want to begin today by taking a look at our history, by taking a look back in time and hearing the words from Frederick Douglass about his perception of what freedom and Independence Day meant to him 178 years ago. And in order to do that, I want to give a portion of my talk time today for us to listen to his words. And I found a video on NPR this week that is a number of Frederick Douglass's great-great-great-great-great-grandchildren reading some excerpts from a speech of his where he's speaking to a group of abolitionist women 11 years before the Emancipation Proclamation. And so if you will, take the next 6 or so minutes and just take this in.
Do I look there or look there? Okay. Okay. My name is Alexa Ann Watson, and I am the great-great-great-granddaughter of Frederick
Douglass is my great-great-great-great.
I am the great-great-great-granddaughter of Frederick Douglass.
I am the great-great-great-great-grandchild.
I've been counting on my fingers since I was like 5.
Whenever you're ready, here we go.
This is the 4th of July. It is the birthday of your national independence and of your political freedom.
Fellow citizens, I shall not presume to dwell at length on the associations that cluster about this day. The simple story of it is that 76 years ago, the people of this country were British subjects.
Oppression makes a wise man mad. Your fathers were wise men, and if they did not go mad, they became restive under this treatment.
With brave men, there's always a remedy for oppression.
They succeeded, and today you reap the fruits of their success. The freedom gained is yours, and you, therefore, may properly celebrate this anniversary.
Fellow citizens, pardon me. Allow me to ask, why am I called upon to speak here today? What have I, or those I represent, to do with your national independence?
Are the great principles of political freedom and of natural justice embodied in that Declaration of Independence extended to us?
I am not included within the pale of this glorious anniversary.
Your high independence only reveals the immeasurable distance between us. The blessings in which you this day rejoice are not enjoyed in common.
The rich inheritance of justice, liberty, prosperity, and independence bequeathed by your fathers is shared by you, not by me.
The sunlight that brought life and healing to you has brought stripes and death to me.
This 4th of July is yours, not mine.
You may rejoice, I must mourn.
Fellow citizens, above your national tumultuous joy, I hear the mournful wail of millions.
At a time like this, scorching irony, not convincing argument is needed.
Oh, had I the ability and could reach the nation's ear, I would today pour out a fiery stream of biting ridicule, blasting reproach, withering sarcasm, and stern rebuke.
For it is not light that is needed, but fire.
It is not the gentle shower, but thunder.
We need the storm, the whirlwind, and the earthquake.
The feeling of the nation must be quickened.
The conscience of the nation must be roused.
The propriety of the nation must be startled.
The hypocrisy of the nation must be exposed.
And its crimes against God and man must be proclaimed and denounced.
What to the American slave is your 4th of July? I answer, a day that reveals to him, more than all other days in the year, the gross injustice and cruelty to which he is the constant victim.
To him, your celebration is a sham.
Your boasted liberty an unholy license.
Your national greatness, swelling vanity.
Your sounds of rejoicing are empty and heartless.
Your denunciations of tyrants, brass-fronted impudence.
Your shouts of liberty and equality, hollow mockery.
Your prayers and hymns, your sermons and thanksgivings,
With all your religious parade and solemnity, are to him
Mere bombast.
Fraud.
deception,
Impiety.
and hypocrisy. There is not a nation on the earth guilty of practices more shocking and bloody than are the people of these United States at this very hour. Allow me to say in conclusion, notwithstanding the dark picture I have this day presented of the state of the nation, I do not despair of this country.
This speech was written almost 170 years ago, but this part of it is still extremely relevant, especially with today's protests.
I think that when people are oppressed, they feel silenced, and if someone feels silenced, they get angry. There are certain tactics that you need to use to get people to really hear your voice, and it's not always going to be just like a very calm discussion.
I think he's mostly talking to the people who are already on his side, but believe that they can still try to talk this out, or that things are still justifiable. I know a lot of people at the time were saying, and people now are still saying, that it's not as bad as it could be.
While the 4th of July probably does not feel the same to me as it does to others, I wouldn't say that it has no meaning, because it is the time when America as a country became free from another country. But I would say that it's not the time in which I gained my freedom.
He had a lot of hope, especially for his age. And I'm getting to the point in my life where I'm only 20 years old, but I'm exhausted. I have these thoughts like, will we ever really get to this point? Or is this really something that we should actually spend our time fighting for?
Somebody once said that pessimism is a tool of white oppression, and I think that's true. I think in many ways we are still slaves to the notion that it will never get better. But I think that there is hope, and I think it's important that we celebrate Black joy and Black life, and we remember that change is possible, change is probable, and that there's hope.
And so I wanted to take the time to share that video this morning because I believe it speaks much to the root of our definition of freedom in this country, and that there are different definitions of freedom based on the color of our skin, based on the privileges that we do or do not have, or based on the oppression that we have or have not experienced. And I was watching an interview with Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King earlier this week as well, and it was 11 months before his assassination, and he was speaking to this idea of freedom. And he said, at the time of the Emancipation Proclamation was also the time of the great land grab in the Midwest, where the government said, we are willing to invest in white people. We are willing to give you land. We're willing to give you a head start. We're willing to give you what you need in order to homestead and establish yourself in this country. And at the same time, people of color were granted freedom, but he said we were given the freedom to struggle. We were given the freedom to be left exposed to the rain and to the wind. He said we were given the freedom to hunger. And that at that very moment when we proclaimed freedom, the government also decided who it was going to invest in and who it was going to give advantage to. And so the definition or the idea of freedom that we have experienced in this country really depends on which history you come from, which storyline you've been part of. And I know for myself as a white male that my definition of freedom and that the experience of freedom that I've had in this country and in my lifetime is very different than that of people of color. And I looked up the definition of freedom on the internet this week, and according to dictionary.com, freedom is the power or right to act, speak, or think as one wants without hindrance or restraint. And I believe that that definition of freedom very much speaks to our definition of freedom that we talk about in Science of Mind. That we talk about freedom as a God quality, as that freedom is part of the nature of the universe, that freedom is our birthright to express. And yet we think that freedom is our right to be and do however we want. That freedom is our right to be completely unlimited, to be unrestrained, to think and choose and be and act however it is that we want to be. And as we heard in this video from the words of Frederick Douglass, that idea of freedom as being my individual freedom, the freedom that I have the ability to do whatever I want, does not include the ripple effect and the impact and the disparities that my freedoms and my choices might create, the impact of my choices. You know, I have a dear friend who spent some time in the last year working in Ecuador cleaning up an oil spill, or working on research on how to clean up a terrible oil spill in the Amazon rainforest, where acres and acres and acres, hundreds of acres of rainforest are literally pools of oil sitting in the ground. And the communities around these areas have high rates of cancer. And that oil is a direct result of the shipping on the west coast of the United States. That those oil drills, that those plants, that oil boom that happened there has supported all shipping and transit on the west coast of the United States. And that through my freedom to purchase, to eat organic food, to have the things and the luxuries and the comforts that I want, I have been directly harming people who live in Ecuador. I have been directly harming the environment because of my freedom of choice. And I want us to begin to be willing as people who claim high spiritual ideals, as people who claim that we have a vision of a world that works for all, as people who claim that freedom is a God-given right and a quality of the universe that each one of us has the right to express and experience, that we must start to define our freedom as something that is about our collective, that is about our interdependence and not our independence, that freedom is something that should be a reflection of how the universe works, of how interconnected systems that support each other, that bring thriving about for all people and all of life. But that if we only think of freedom as something that involves our own personal independence, then we begin to become the oppressor. We begin to place our individual freedom and independence above that of the collective, above that of the other. And don't we see that thing, that sort of infectious idea of what freedom and independence means? We're having this argument right now all over the nation of whether people should be wearing masks or not. Because some people are saying it's my individual right to choose what I want to do. And others are saying that in order for all of us to be free, we must protect each other. For all of us to be safe and have the freedom to live and move and have our being and think and act in the way that we want, we must create a world that protects the other, that lifts each other up. That the Black Lives Matter movement, that this national conversation that we're having on race is truly a conversation about freedom. About what freedom means to the individual, what freedom means to the collective, what freedom means to our society, what freedom means to our world. Because if our definition of freedom only includes our personal independence, then I believe we are working with a flawed definition. And that we need to work on a new idea of freedom, a new version of freedom that is not about celebrating our independence, but of celebrating the freedom that comes when we recognize how interdependent we all are. And that there is an opportunity in front of us to begin to dissect our history, to look at the things that have got us to where we are now, to begin to explore the reflections and how that's working in each one of us, so that we can start to free ourselves from the systems that we have been perpetuating in seeking our own freedom. You know, Reverend Alice chose this image that I'm sure you saw in the beginning of our broadcast of a pair of hands breaking some chains. All across Centers for Spiritual Living this month, there's a shared theme for our conversations. And that theme is unchained spirituality. And that theme came to us through visioning, through contemplation, and through coming together in small groups. And that theme came almost a year ago or 6 months ago as to what we need to be talking about this month. The collective theme that was chosen for today was free at last. Later this month, the conversation theme is none are free until all are free. That right now we are engaged in a new conversation of what does freedom mean? You know, I just started working through the book Me and White Supremacy this week. I've spent a lot of time listening to Black voices talk about race through TED Talks and YouTube videos, and reaching out to some people in my life to get some perspective and information. And I realize how interwoven these systems of oppression are into my life and into my own thinking. As I begin to work through the book Me and White Supremacy, I have this mirror that is reflecting myself back to me. And my friends, I have a lot of work to do. The more that I listen and I recognize what Black voices have been trying to say for years, for decades, for centuries, I am just barely beginning to understand the big picture. And that my personal quest right now is begin to understand, what does it truly look like to live in a world where we define freedom as a basic human right for all people. And within that idea of freedom is an idea of the freedom to thrive, of the freedom to live, of the freedom to breathe, of the freedom to have a future, of a freedom to be remembered by history, of a freedom to be recognized as a human being. And so on this 4th of July weekend, on this Independence Day weekend, I want to invite all of us to begin to contemplate, what does a new definition of freedom look like? What does it look like for us, especially people of privilege, white people, myself, to begin to untangle ourselves from the hidden influences and the hidden perspectives and the hidden ideas that we've been perpetuating and participating in, that have been lifting up these systems of oppression and keeping our brothers and sisters and family and community members of color from having the same freedoms that we do. That it is time for all of us to break the chains of oppression from within our hearts and minds. And I know for myself that it starts with me. That I have to truly begin to look at the world and recognize that anything that I see out there, I can only see because it exists in me. And that if I see racism, if I see oppression, if I see a misinterpretation of freedom, if I see blind choices being made, I recognize that I must be participating, that these things must exist in me, and that if I see them in the world and I want to unravel them in the world, then I must begin by untying the knots within myself. And so that is my invitation for all of us, is to begin to look in the mirror, to begin to look in the world, to be willing to do the work, and perhaps even be willing to ask ourselves, where has my definition of freedom, my personal seeking for my own independence, contributed to a world where that same freedom has not been available for other people? Because I do believe in a vision of a world that works for everyone. That this movement of Centers for Spiritual Living has been compelled by this idea for over a decade, and we have been declaring for years our global vision. And I believe that what we are seeing right now is the breakdown of the systems and the thoughts and the ideas and the ways of doing and being that have been holding that vision back. And so let us participate in the great unraveling of what was and the acknowledgement of what has been, so that we can rise together into a new future, into a new possibility, and create new ways of doing and being that actually support this idea of a world that works for everyone. But we must first pause and look at the places and the people and the groups and the situations where the world is not working for everyone, and seek to lift up the voices and the people who this world has not been working for, so that together someday we can begin to build this collective vision. But I think the work right now is to participate in the great unraveling of what was, as we pull it apart from within ourselves and we begin to let our hearts lead us forward. Take a deep breath. And if you will, close your eyes. And so let us just be together in the awareness this morning that indeed there is only one life, that there is only one heart, that there is only one mind, that there is one living and breathing energy, that is unfolding throughout the entirety of the universe. I call it God. I call it our collective consciousness. I call it the energy and the evolution and the movement of life itself. And I recognize that this one is living and breathing and moving and having its way throughout the entirety of the universe, and that means that it is unfolding right here and right now as my life, as everything that is happening in our society and in our communities and on this world. Everything that is unfolding here and now is the action and the evolution of God itself. And so I speak this word to remind myself and to remind each one of us who is hearing this that there is only one of us here. And it is that one that is rising up, calling forth new possibility. It is that one who is rising out and calling out that which has not been serving us, so that we may recreate what is, so that we may begin to build a world that works for all, starting in the places that are not working and lifting them up, recreating them, reimagining them, standing for ideas of absolute truth and freedom and love. Let us be a community of people who believe that love is stronger than anything. And let us seek to look for love in the eyes of every person. Let us seek to hear across the great divide of otherness. Let us seek to be willing to hear perspectives from all sides, so that we may find the humanity in each person, so that we may find the divine presence in each person, so that we can begin to become a nation and a people who live to the high ideals and values that many of us have believed this country has been founded on. But perhaps it has not yet lived up to. Now is the time for us to declare what is true, what is necessary, and what is good, and incorporate it into every facet of our individual lives, our self-work, our choices, our purchases, our votes, and our societal and collective activities. Let us move to a place where we can celebrate that it is the Spirit of the living God, that it is evolution itself that is taking place before our eyes and rising up in front of us and calling us to a greater and better and newer way of being. Let each of us surrender and let go and remember that there is a power for good in this universe that is greater than we are, and it is ever seeking to express in, through, as, and for each one of us. And so it is from that place that I invite us to breathe and to let it be, and together say, and so it is.